Hello, how are you doing? You've been very kind and watched some of my videos over this last week or two, and today I've got about at least 3 more queuing up in my mind, quite important and big topics. But in the end, I think I want to share with you a story from my life and a conclusion that comes from it, from the Buddha's teaching. It's about my best friend from the 1970s. His name was Bill Carter. Thanks to him, some of the major things that have coloured my whole life came about. He was truly such a wonderful blessing in my life. So to cut a very, very long story short, in the 60s I was a beatnik. I hit the road with a guitar, slept rough, made poems and so on. Then I needed to work for a while, so I used my engineering skills and did a year in industry. Then I couldn't hack it. I dropped out again. I was going to go to Spain to learn Spanish Andalusian guitar. But the following week I ended up in a BBC party to celebrate 40 years of Mrs. Dale's Diary, a radio program. And a group of people were talking about the need for a manager in a centre just off Piccadilly that was helping homeless heroin addicts. Somehow, the next week, I ended up being a manager, a co-manager. The place was going to close. This is why we got talking. It needed 2 managers, and they only had 1. The other one had gone, and so I ended up as that. It was one of the most vivid, real, informative experiences of my whole life. The place itself was crummy. It was a cockroach-ridden basement. Many of the addicts were really, really dirty. They had lice and fleas, didn't wash very much. And because they injected barbiturates, they had terrible abscesses that we dressed, and so on. And there was violence. But nevertheless, there was such an immediacy, and those people were real. The contact with each of them so different, was so real, and it was a kind of an emergency situation every day. Somehow we managed to feed them, dress their wounds, give them some advice. People died from overdose in my hands. You cannot believe how that is. Somebody's turning more and more yellow, and their life is fading away, and before the ambulance comes, they're gone. Other people got upset. They would fight with bottles, excuse me, with razor blades, and I had to separate them. But anyway, in the middle of that, one of my jobs was to interview volunteers. People volunteered to help, but it's a very sensitive place to be exposed to the drugs. And one person came along, and immediately there was an eye-to-eye, heart-to-heart, wonderful contact, as though you're meeting somebody from many, many lifetimes, and you know this person is important. So although words were exchanged and I asked the right questions, a friendship was formed, and very soon we were living in the same house with other friends. That work folded because of politics. I had no money at the time. I was working there unpaid, and in fact I was cleaning houses in the morning to keep myself alive. Bill's parents had died, and he had an inheritance. And so thanks to him, I went to India. He bought a VW Kombi, and 4 of us drove overland from London to Dharamsala. And after that I spent some 5 months there. He was there some of the time, travelled across India to Darjeeling and other places as well. And while I was there, I fell in love with such a lovely person, Jamie. But the time came when he was going to drive back to London, and because I depended on that to get back home, it was time to say goodbye. And so I said goodbye to Jamie in Delhi, and we drove back to Afghanistan, to Kabul. And the plan was to drive overnight from Kabul to Herat. But halfway through the night, in the freezing cold of winter, Bill turned to me. I was driving, he was in the passenger seat, and he said, "Ken, you're so sad. I can't bear to see this. What we're going to do is turn round, drive back to Kabul. I'll sell the combi. I'll give you half the money. You go back to India, and I'm going to go to the Soviet Union to travel." Which he did. I went back to India. In the end, I found Jamie, and through finding her in Bodh Gaya in a Goenkaji course, I then did 2 Goenkaji retreats with Goenkaji, which was a wonderful experience. Such a great meditator and person. And eventually the money went, and it was time to come back to Europe. So we travelled overland together. We weren't lovers anymore. Something had happened in the Goenkaji course and with Ram Dass. And we were good friends, but not lovers. So we travelled together to Istanbul, and I said goodbye to her and went back to the UK. And there I reconnected with Bill, and to my surprise, and through him, I discovered Tibetans in Scotland, in Samiling. He'd hired a house near Samiling, Ravenhead, for 6 months, and he invited me up. And through him, I was introduced to Akon Rinpoche, who was to be my lifetime guru, and later friend as well. He introduced me to Katia to make music, because I played guitar a lot, and she played sitar, Indian sitar. And she became, of course, my lifelong companion and wife and friend, and also fellow traveller in Dharma, and another fellow Dharma teacher. So I owe Bill a lot, but I think the thing I owe him the most, looking back, is that he taught me to be still, not in formal meditation, but to sit in tenderness and allow life to be. And he taught my eyes to open. And he taught me through his kindness to so many people. He was so kind and generous without making a song and dance about it. He was a much more evolved soul than I was. So that journey took place in 1970. In 1976, he died young of a brain tumour quite quickly. He was in Canada. I owe that man so much. He gave me my life in Tibetan Buddhism, Akon Rinpoche, Katia, and an example of kindness to follow. I always thought I would soon find a child who would be his reincarnation, and I would help that wee being so much, because my gratitude was unbearable. But I never did, even though for years and years I looked. But what I understood was this. It wasn't a question of finding him and then being kind to him. It was a question of learning to be as kind to anyone I ever met, as he was to me. Because this life is so precious, so precious. And it will end. And as we leave this life, it is our kindness to each other. And in particular, our bringing in the gift of love and truth and peacefulness, and helping people to love themselves and care for themselves, so that they can learn through loving themselves to care for each other. I'm not very good at it. I'm doing my best. The Buddha's teaching say that the essence of loving kindness is in repaying the kindness that's been shown to us. It's so true. And Akon Rinpoche told me, he said, you need to make a big effort, Ken, because you're too attracted by attractive human beings, those with skills that we can learn from, people who are high flyers. And he said, you need to look at those who are ugly of mind, ugly of body, who are old, who you ignore. And you need to learn to love them and help them. I'm still working on that too. But it's so true. Every day at present, every weekday, I travel in an ambulance taxi to the hospital in Marseille for my radiotherapy. Many things have been cancelled in the hospital because of the virus, but still the radiotherapy is maintained. So the people I travel with in the taxi, they're quite serious cases. And some of them I'll only see once in my life for that journey. And so I try to look at them as I'd look on Bill if he came back. And there's not just Bill, many people have been so kind to me. I think very much of my mother. She was a very, very kind and selfless person. She didn't think for herself, she thought for all of our family and in places where we lived. She'd be the one who'd be aware of neighbours who needed help. And even though she died over 15 years ago, now, if I close my eyes, she's right there. And that presence is so caring and so loving. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I have her kindness to repay, not replay. Well, I suppose it's the same thing. And yeah, my teacher, Akon Rinpoche, so many people. So when we think of the kindness that's been given to us, it somehow opens the heart, and we think, if only I could repay that person. And we do that through helping whomever we can, day after day. This life ends so quickly. When we leave it, what will count is the love we've shown to each other. And if we can, the way we've helped each other, love ourselves and care for our hearts, care for our minds, so tenderly. The Bodhisattva teachings say it's like you've just been operated and you're walking through a crowded marketplace and you need to protect your wound so carefully. So we are not wounded, but this opening heart and mind of ours needs to be looked after that preciously, that carefully. And we need to help others on their Dharma way as well, because this life will end. And the power of kindness, the power of love, the power of simplicity is what will go with us as our best friend. Please live in love, my friends. If you live in love, death will not be a problem, and in the next life, people will be kind to you. And there's nothing more wonderful than that. These are exceptional times. We need to go beyond the habitual norm. We need to find the fullness, the light that we all are.